Now, that, of course, means that if the Israeli state or elements within the Israeli state wants to carry out provocational terrorist acts, and they're probably working closely with NATO, Gladio networks, these things probably overlap, then control it. The private security is the vector for most of the terrorism that we're seeing. Blackwater, Shia, and all the rest of it, they are the terrorists.
Getting bigger by being better. The number one choice for Bristol. This is BCFM 93.2.
Well, several weeks ago, the Home Secretary Theresa May announced 2 inquiries into Westminster-related child abuse, and one of them has hit the buffers almost straight away. That was the long-term inquiry, which was going to be chaired by Baroness Butler-Schloss. Her husband was actually the Attorney General while this is all supposed to be going on and didn't prosecute, and there's questions about whether anybody would feel confident in him running that inquiry. But the other inquiry, Martin, was chaired by a chap called Peter Wanless. Now, Peter Wanless is the Chief Executive now of the NSPCC. Now, if you go onto the internet, you'll see there's quite a lot of pictures of Jimmy Savile with his NSPCC badges on. I mean, he was very, very closely connected to the NSPCC, it seems, as one of their chief fundraisers. And that's not the only question about whether the Chief Executive of the NSPCC is an appropriate person, because Peter Wanless was also the personal private secretary to Michael Portillo. Now, Portillo was involved in this so-called scandal, which then was all denied back in the early 1990s too. Late 1980s, early 1990s. So, I mean, what's the point of choosing people who it seems have been implicated in previous scandals and cover-ups to run these inquiries? The first one has already fallen. How long is Peter Wanless going to last?
Well, I don't know. I mean, obviously there's a very stinky smell around all of this. And, of course, if you want to cover it up, then you definitely bring people in to deal with the inquiry who are going to come up with the result that you want them to come up with. Well, I mean, that's got to be the fear, hasn't it?
The allegations back in the 80s were that Peter, Lilley and Michael Portillo were in some kind of love triangle with the gay footballer Justin Fashanu, who then died in mysterious circumstances very shortly afterwards. So let's go back now to an interview I conducted this week with a guy called Pete, and he was telling me just how he was actually intimately involved with a journalist who was trying to cover this story at the time.
Okay, yeah, my name's Pete. It's just something that I was closely involved in through a very close friend of mine who was a freelance journalist. I used to work in a bar, and this chap used to come in regularly and have a drink, and he would have a late drink, lock in, and we'd have a chat every evening, and we became quite close sort of bar buddies, if you know what I mean. Anyway, one day he came in with a story where he said that this is a potential dynamite shell that could bring down the Conservative government of the time. This is in the 80s. I can give you specifically when it was, but not the date off the top of my head, because it was around about... It was at the same time as that Stephen Milligan guy was found dead with a satsuma in his mouth and a plastic bag with a cord round his neck.
He was an MP, I think, wasn't he?
He was, Stephen Milligan, and it was the height of the Tory sleaze scandal of that particular time, you know. Anyway, this chap, the journalist, has come into the bar one night. He's gone, I've got this amazing story. He said, I've got 2 really high-ranking government officials in a gay love triangle with the gay football star Justin Fashanu. And I was, like, fascinated by this. This is incredible. If you brought this out into the open, it could be really dynamic. Anyway, he didn't have the smoking gun evidence to really actually go ahead to the press and reveal it yet.
So he couldn't quite stand the story up?
Not quite, no. Anyway, when Milligan was found dead with the satsuma in his mouth, laced with amyl nitrate, I said to this chap, I said, well, do you not think that this is the right time to publish this story? You know, because it is, you know, the more of this information that comes out about the Conservative government, then the more damaging it will be for them. A day or two later, he came in and he had a copy of the Daily Express. And in the Daily Express, he showed me this half-page report that he had written dealing with 2 unnamed government officials in a gay love triangle with the gay footballer Justin Fashanu. The following morning, or the following day, I mean, I don't know exactly when he flew out, but Justin Fashanu mysteriously vanished and flew out to America. I think he went to Miami or somewhere like that. Gone, disappeared off the scene. My journalist friend, well, I didn't see him again. He used to come in every single day, and he didn't come in again. And then about a week later, his girlfriend came in. I said, what's happened? You know, and he said, He's had to go and stay with his grandmother because the day after the news report appeared in the paper, he got pressure from MI5 and he had to go and live with his grandmother in Scotland. And I've never seen him again. He just disappeared completely off the scene. The two government ministers that were implicated, which never got named, were Peter Lilley and Michael Portillo.
So why do you think your mate disappeared, Pete?
According to his girlfriend, the following day, the MI5 came and put pressure on him, and he had to disappear off the scene. He had to go and retreat up to Scotland to live with his grandmother, and I've never seen his name in print ever since.
Do you think this has got any real relevance for what's been going on today? In 2014, we've also had the Savile scandal and all sorts of other things.
Yes, well, I think it's completely relevant, because the other twist to that the story that I just told you is that about 2 months later, I'm not exactly sure of the exact timescale because it was about 20 years ago, but Justin Fashanu was found hanged in a lockup in Shoreditch. Apparently suicide, but who knows? I mean, because if this really is the implication that these people are involved in all this, whatever it's sexual dalliances, and they're trying to keep it hidden up, and they're trying to put on this face of like respectability, this false facade that they try to portray, and in fact there's all this sleaze and corruption going on behind the scenes, whether it's with young boys or underage children, or whether it is in simply a gay sort of thing that is not being revealed and being hidden up, then it's obviously relevant, because these people are still in the public eye and they should be exposed for the liars, and potential implication is that they could even be involved in getting rid of these people. It's terrible. The whole thing just really stinks of putting people in charge of these investigations that are actually implicated themselves, so they've got something to hide, and they will hide the truth, and they almost definitely will hide the truth, and the quicker the truth is exposed, the better we can expose these people for what they actually really are. Whoever is conducting this investigation should not have any connection to the Conservative Party, to Westminster, or to any political organisation at all. They should be completely and utterly independent, and they should not have any bias to bear against or for. I would say it has to be completely independent, so that the actual real truth can come out, and not a whitewash of lies and obfuscation of the truth.
Going back to your journalist friend who disappeared at the time, have you any idea what happened to him? I mean, have you ever seen any articles by him or whatever since then?
Well, when I've researched his name on the internet, I've not seen anything that's connected to him in any way at all ever since that time. And he was at the time an up and coming journalist, just trying to find his way in the freelance journalism. And as far as I can tell, he's disappeared off the face of the earth. I've never seen any trace of him. And I'd love to find out what happened to him, quite frankly.
Well, we will see if we can find out what happened to him. But Martin, ultimately, this is a bit of barroom talk, but it's actually an interesting bit of testimony from somebody who was around at the time and who's prepared to name names as he was there. What his essential thrust of this is, it seems that people who are implicated in these abuse scandals are actually being put in charge of the inquiry. Certainly, there are all sorts of questions about whether anybody who has been abused would trust Peter Wanless from the NSPCC to run an inquiry, would actually be prepared to go into confidence with him about the way they were abused.
Well, yes, I mean, that's obviously got to be the fear that because these networks are so well dug in at the top of the establishment, that they will be protected. And, of course, Judge Butler Schloss had to resign because her brother, Sir Michael Havers, was the Attorney General at the time. I think what we're looking at here is not just child abuse. There's plenty of evidence of that, but it's the uses of child abuse at the top of the establishment in terms of blackmail, in terms of steering people to fulfil certain kind of goals. So, as I mentioned before, the Kincora Boys Home in Northern Ireland was definitely being used by MI5 at one stage in order to entrap political figures in Northern Ireland.
Well, that was in the news again last week, actually, yeah. Kincora. But the main point that Pete is making there is surely anyone that's running an inquiry should have absolutely no connection with the establishment or any of the main political parties.
Well, that you would have thought so. And the question is, are these people basically going to cover it up? And I'm afraid the answer probably is yes.
You mentioned also the Dutroux scandal earlier. How does that, do you think, relate? I mean, is there anything we can learn from the Dutroux scandal over in Belgium, which was very much outed? And in fact, they had the biggest demonstration in Belgian history over that back, I think it was in the 1990s. What can we learn from that about what may be going on here?
Well, I think what I take from all of this is that intelligence services use paedophilia as a means of political control. So if you can get politicians compromised by having sex with underage partners, then you can then basically blackmail them to make them do what you want. That's got to be the fear that's what's going on here.
Yeah, also in the 1980s, early 90s, there was the death of this MP, Stephen Milligan, that Pete's talking about there, who was found with an orange in his mouth in some kind of weird sexual pose, hanging. That does look as if it may very well be connected to this Justin Fashanu death and to this gay sex triangle, possibly. Any thoughts about whether that... I mean, he's saying there he thinks that possibly MI5 murdered Stephen Milligan.
Well, I think the idea that the intelligence services use paedophilia as a tool is absolutely
But could the security services murder an MP?
Yes, they could. There's no reason to presume otherwise. I mean, what we know of NATO's intelligence services, if you actually look, the history is there. NATO's secret armies, for example, by Daniel Ganser, who's a Swiss academic. Posimato's book in Italy, The Republic of the Unpunished Massacres, he being head of the Italian Supreme Court. There is MI6, CIA and other Western intelligence services have engaged in terrorism and have used things like paedophilia in order to blackmail targets. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
And I would suggest anybody that does know anything about this kind of thing should go and speak to the police, but then they're also obviously encouraged to talk about it with journalists too.
Made in Bristol. This is BCFM 93.2.